Okay. Good evening. Thank you for everyone for staying. This is Tuesday, February 22nd, and I'm calling this committee of the whole to order. We have a quorum. We have one person on WebEx. I am going to start this with the pre-registered citizens for matters appearing on the agenda. And before I start calling your name, I'm going to just remind people that when you do speak to us, many times there are people that come to the podium and then start asking questions and look around to the members. And we are not allowed to interact with you, just so you know. We're not ignoring you or anything like that. We just listen to your comments. So we will start tonight with Bruce Grau. Thank you.
I look at you because I like to look at you. Does this count against my 3 minutes? Jesus. So I'm Bruce Grau from the Poor People's Campaign, 1115 North 10th Street. It'll be going on 14 days since we've been made aware of the over 2-year-old result that all our city water is tainted with a forever poison at a level that the DHS is strongly recommending all Wausonians cut down their water intake. Choosing not to immediately invoke an executive order, our city leaders have yet to launch a comprehensive and consistent response. Pregnant women, nursing babies, children, immunocompromised and disabled people, those most susceptible to the effects of PFAS contamination, continue to drink, cook, and mix their formula with contaminated water. Moreover, in a city where the majority of residents live in poverty, susceptibility to health consequences of a contaminated environment is heightened. Our whole community suffers more with each day of inaction. My friends are confused by the mixed messages coming from here. Bottled water is expensive. They're concerned about long-term consequences of forever chemicals and cumulative contaminant exposure. They're asking if the disabling conditions they now endure are a result of long-term environmental contamination from living here. They are most concerned for their kids. They feel the rights of polluting companies are protected by the city more than their human right to a healthy life. They're also asking, why has it taken so long for the city to provide clean water? I see growing frustration, anxiety, apathy, anger, and distrust with this city. To convey the message that poor and vulnerable people are a priority and to help restore confidence for them in their city government, I think we must see one, immediate distribution of water and filtering devices provided for all Wausonians. Number 2, an immediate plan made to reach those that are homebound and disabled. Number 3, a full investigation launched into this revelation of PFAS contamination. Number 4, thorough testing of groundwater around all high-risk areas such as Wausau Chemical and 3M. Number 5, provide counseling. Counseling for my friends who are concerned about past and future effects of PFAS and cumulative contamination, with costs to be offset by contributions sought from 3M and others found to have contributed to environmental contamination. Water is life. Clean water is our right. Government must assure that our rights and our life are not forfeited to companies who pollute to make profits. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra Kelch?
Hi, I'm Sandy Couch. I live at 802 Augusta Avenue. I am a mom of adult disabled sons. I am also the executive director of the Community Outreach Task Force. Part of my job there is to advocate for the most vulnerable in our community, and that's what I'm doing tonight. I attended the Water Commission meeting and left very discouraged. There was mixed messages as to whether the water was safe or not safe. As a mom of a fragile son, I'm going to take the advice of the doctor that spoke that day, because she has no skin in the game other than to keep us safe. So again, my son is low income and disabled, and I support my other son solely as a single mom. And it is difficult to survive day to day as in a normal day to day. Now I am faced with water filters, the Life Straw bottles, and when I added it all up, it was half of my monthly income to keep my kids safe. As a voter and as a citizen of the city, you are supposed to represent me, protect me, and my children, and I'm asking you to do that. I'm asking you to stop looking through privileged eyes and thinking like a credit for a water bill is going to protect the most vulnerable, because it's not. A credit for a fancy filter system will not protect the most vulnerable because they can't afford it to begin with. So please, protect those that you are voted into office to protect. Demand that filters are provided for all in Wausau, especially the most vulnerable, those who cannot afford. Thank you.
Thank you. Brittany Reamer?
This might be a little tall for me, but I will give it a shot here. There we go. I'm Brittany Reamer. I live at 1109 Brown Street in Wausau. I'm a tri-chair for the Wisconsin Poor People's Campaign. I keep hearing phrases like voluntary testing and being proactive used in a context that seems to beg of a pat on the back and other praise. But the truth is, our water should be tested regularly, whether it's required or not. And those results should be presented to the public in a timely, honest, and transparent manner. Proactiveness would possibly have prevented us from sitting here today and would certainly have ensured that our new $120 million water treatment facility already possessed the capability to effectively reduce PFAS. Our water should be as clean and as safe as possible, whether there are regulations or not. And if that isn't happening, the community needs to start asking itself why. Being a public servant is not about doing the bare minimum just to say you did something. It's about going above and beyond to fulfill your duty to meet the needs, especially the basic needs of your community, including those who are poor, low income, essential workers, elderly, disabled, and unhoused. That is a true community for all. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Trevor Copeland. Trevor Copeland? I don't see him. And that was our last person. No. Okay, so thank you all. We are going to number 2, presentation and discussion on PFAS and city water. I'm going to ask the mayor to begin. I know that I've been in a lot of conversations with some and others not at all. So I think that she can bring together what has happened in the last couple of weeks since we're all sitting together. Thank you.
Sure. I'm going to kind of share, if you've been paying attention to our meetings, you've probably heard some of this before. We also have our folks from the DNR, and I think Dr. Yang, but it's hard for me to see here. So we have some folks who can answer some of your questions too. So in January, Wausau Water Works worked with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Health Services to test every city well for PFAS. And all 6 of those wells did contain levels of PFAS that exceed the proposed DNR drinking water standard. So those levels ranged from 23 parts per trillion to 48 parts per trillion, depending on the well. Now, if you've been paying attention to some of the discussion about this, Wausau Water Works is not in violation of any drinking water standards or regulations, but we do have these two different PFAS health advisories that we're tracking, and it's important to public health. So the United States Environmental Protection Agency urges PFAS removal if 70 parts per trillion are found. And then the Wisconsin DNR is advising and proposing a drinking water standard actually tomorrow of 20 parts per trillion or less for municipal water. Now, both of these take into account of exposure of PFAS over time. That's a lifetime depending on what you're looking at for the science. Now, the science is still unfolding about these contaminants because they're emerging. Kyle Burton from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources is here to answer any questions you have with regards to DNR. And Dr. Sarah Yang, I believe, is here from the Wisconsin Department of Health Services to answer any questions when it comes to human health and what we're seeing in other communities. From a policy perspective, I really think that this body needs to talk through what we believe the public's expectations are. I know you've probably been hearing from folks. I have too. Some people are still just looking for more information. So what our options are if we decide to move ahead in the short term, especially to provide water, so that we can get folks with drinking water under the DNR health advisory of 20 parts per trillion, and what policy actions that will take and what that timeline looks like. Now, we've committed to providing safe drinking water for everyone, not some, all. So while we're still trying to understand the health effects of PFAS, we need to be mindful that we're including the public in these decisions and that they could affect their health in the long term. What we want is for people to make choices about their own health, not be forced into it because of us. So I will tell you some of the things that we're actively working through right now. Is bottled water for the underserved populations. I've been working with the Neighbor's Place. I've had some corporate folks reach out and say, we want to donate. So I've had them going straight to the Neighbor's Place to work that out. We've been working with the Wisconsin and Marathon County Emergency Management Team. We've identified at least 32 pallets of purified bottled water that our nonprofit partners are willing to help us distribute to those underserved populations through the Neighbor's Place, United Way, Hunger Coalition, Among American Center, Catholic Charities, and others. I'm sure I'm forgetting some. And we've also identified 31 pallets of water through federal sources that we can get for free, but we'd have to pay for shipping. So I can give you all the insights on that, but basically we can get those 31 pallets for around $13,000 in shipping. Obviously, there's other sources we can source locally, maybe through big box stores or through Amazon. That's an option. If you're curious what a pallet of bottled water looks like, it's about 1,800 pint water bottles fit per pallet. And when we're looking at the underserved population that the health department kind of describes, these 32 pallets that we've identified, and we're having them come on in, that would be about maybe more than 2 weeks, but less than 3, so that's a thing. Obviously, we've heard a little bit about reverse osmosis fill stations. That's an option, although there are some challenges with that, that if that's something we want to look at, we can talk through. Individual filters, I know, are things that folks have been talking about. That's an option for you. Mobile filtration units that we would attach to our current drinking water facility. We have folks kind of working through what that looks like. And then, we're probably going to need an environmental engineer consultant. That's going to be something I would come to this body to help guide us through this process as far as project management. I'm not sure if I missed anything okay, it looks like I'm getting the thumbs up from staff. So that's my spiel, but we have folks on hand to answer your questions, science related, environmental related, and if there's any questions you have for me, I'm sitting right here.
We also have Andrew Dow from Donahue is on, and he is for some of the newer, I guess, folks, they are part of the consultants with the water and the wastewater plant that have been working with the city for quite a number of years. So we're going to just kick this off, and we'll start with Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I have just a couple of questions. So I watched the Water Commission on live stream last week, and, I was listening to the questions that some of the commissioners had asked, and I think that those questions were asked of Dr. Yang. So I would ask her to correct me if I'm wrong, but they had asked her about the 20 parts per trillion standard and why 20. And I believe I heard her say that the 20 is the safest standard for a developing infant. And then she was asked about consumption, the basis for consumption. And I believe that that was indicating consumption at a rate of 2 liters per adult and 1 liter per child. Was that correct, Dr. Yang? Or do we have her?
Okay, maybe she didn't,
Okay.
I'll email her one more.
Okay, and that's totally fine. But so knowing that 20 should be our goal, 20 or less should be our goal. The next question I asked last week, because I do truly believe, based on the structure of the water utility, the Water Commission is in charge of managing the water service in the city. And so one thing I don't want us to do is get ahead of the Water Commission on the solution end of things, because they actually need to lead that process. Pick from a menu of options, whatever those solutions are, long and short term. If they need money, come to finance, we'll hold special meetings if we need to, and we'll fund whatever they need. But I think that we have to be careful that we don't also undermine the work of the Water Commission, because they're all kind of up to their eyeballs in this thing. But the other question that I had asked, and I guess if Public Works Director Lindman would come up, the well testing that we got back that shows the levels of the parts per trillion in these wells is raw water testing at the well prior to treatment. Is that correct?
Yes, so we tested the water at the wells, and we also tested the water leaving the treatment facility.
Right. And so the question that I think that everyone really is interested most in is, what is the parts per trillion number that leaves the plant that comes to the homes?
It's about 30.
30. So what we need really to get to our goal, and when we start to talk about solutions, we really need like a 10-point reduction, at least a 10-point reduction. The good news is we don't need a 50-point reduction. So I think that, when we look at, long-term solutions, the Finance Committee tonight voted to fund a pilot study so that they can do some of the analysis that they need to figure out what the correct combination of resins and filter media is for the new facility to get that facility ready to get us to that goal. Because all of this knowledge is just emerging. But, in the short term, we should be looking at it that, our goal for removal is, we need roughly a 6-month fix, because the plant is supposed to open in August. And so with regard to a short-term fix, what will get us closest to that 10-point reduction? And so one of the things that one of the water commissioners brought up last week was the option to request of the EPA that they allow us to take well 3 out of the drinking water system, even though it's under a run order. Is that work in progress right now?
Yeah, it has been for a couple of years. We want to take well 3 out of production, but it will still have to run, and it will have to be discharged elsewhere.
For the VOC order?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
But would we get some relief, though, on PFAS if well 3 comes out of the mixture?
Yeah, not a whole lot. It's not going to be enough. So well 3 and well 6, one is 33 and one's at 35. And so removing those, the other wells are still over 20. So we're not going
to get to 20 without
That's
some
correct.
modification in the filtration?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
I just want to let you know, Dr. Yang is dialed in.
Okay.
If in case she's ready for the question.
Okay. Dr. Yang, can you hear me okay? Okay, we don't have her.
Okay.
So I think I have her numbers right based on the video from the Water Commission, because I think that was a question that, residents had asked me is, why 20? And what does 20 mean? And what are we really getting like on the faucet end? I think the 30 number is important because there's a wide gap between 20 and 70. I had heard recently that one of our neighboring communities that had to take a well offline, thankfully it wasn't all of theirs, but one of them was over 70. So, I think that as our neighboring communities and our peers start to test like we tested, I think that we're going to be hard pressed to find that this stuff isn't all over. And I think that our neighbors are probably going to find that they have some level of affectedness by these emerging pollutants as everyone else. So, I think that we're in the lead as far as what we can do. I think that, had this happened before we were nearing the completion of the new plant coming online, we would be way worse off than what we are right now. And I guess we should be grateful for the fact that the plant is as far along as it is, because we can make adjustments there that will get us to our goal. So, I guess.
Okay, I'm going to just ask a question. The new plant, I read through that contract that was just passed by finance, apparently. It stated up to 12 to 18 months at the end of testing before they could come up with a plan. That could be a possibility for the new plant. So I just wanted to, is that true, or do you think by the time the plant is open, you will have PFAS filtered, ready to go?
Yeah, I think typically on a pilot study, you want 12 to 18 months worth of data, right? In this situation, we'll be looking at proven technologies. When we go to a shorter pilot, we may not have all the information to determine our long-term operation and maintenance costs. There's other things like breakthrough, things like that, when we have to replace media. We would not have all of that information in that short period of time. But just working with our engineers and talking with them, they feel that, we could have a good scope of which technology would work best with our water chemistry, for the new plant.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Killian.
Thank you, and I have a few questions. Mr. Lindman, follow up to Alder Rasmussen. In terms of the 30 parts per trillion that we're using as the value for kind of treated water at the end of the process, how many analytes does that include of what DHS includes in its guidance? Is that just PFOA and PFAS, or does that include all of the analytes in DHS guidance?
No, PFOA and PFOS, which is what is proposed on the standard right now.
Right
Yep.
now, but down the road, I mean, I'm just a lay person, but I would be able to state, I think, fairly confidently that ultimately DNR standards tend to align with DHS standards at some point and don't diverge in the long term, even if they say that's the case. I've observed that's not often the case. So in terms of that, do we know what it would be if we included all the DHS analytes that relate to their health guidance?
No, not with me, Tom. I don't have that. Nope.
Okay, so at 30 parts per trillion, then what percentage of that in relation to the state's proposed limit? How far are we over? It's about 150% of the proposed, 150% of the proposed standard, is that correct? 10 parts per trillion
Right.
higher than the
Right.
proposed total combined. And, I think this realm of contaminants, it's fairly new to me. When you look at, say, things in the neighborhood that had been dealt with, like dioxin in soil, but let's maybe look at that. So when looking at even the most toxic considered dioxin in soil, TCDD, they're talking about single digits of limits in residential soil. So, and that's in parts per trillion too. So I think it's important for the public to understand that the more toxic the contaminant, the lower those limits tend to be. Do you agree with that?
I would guess that that's how they do them, Tom. mean, it seems to make sense, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then a well CW3 was brought up, and it was brought up by Mr. Jean too, along with CW6, and a consent order was referenced, but there wasn't much detail given on what that related to, and it's my understanding that CW3 and CW6, they have something in common, and it's fairly significant, and those are the extraction remediation wells for the Superfund site, of which the city of Wausau is a responsible party. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so when I went back and Mr. Jean had talked about maybe making the recommendation that CW3 be taken offline, but actually the consultants' plan to the EPA, that GHD's plan in 2021 suggested that CW3 ultimately be taken offline, but only when the new treatment plant was in place. And one thing that confused me about that is the city had PFAS results in 2019, and GHD at the time had simply recommended diverting the water from CW3, the highest well of PFAS, into the storm sewer and discharging it into the Wisconsin River, which confused me because I believe they're using air stripping for VOCs with CW3, but PFAS would be resistant to that, so it would essentially be untreated PFAS contaminated water being discharged into the Wisconsin River. And then lastly, and these are just follow-ups from what we've heard so far, but also I think as the District 3 representative, one thing that seems very significant to me looking at the historical situation is that Superfund site, it has a lot of records behind it over many, many years. And one thing it shows is that CW3 well historically had been impacted by at least 2 contaminant plumes. One of them was coming from the west side of the river near the former landfill and Marathon Electric, which had actually gone under the river toward CW3, and then the other contaminant plume had stemmed from Wausau Chemical. Now, those were related to VOCs. However, given the historical information we know, I would want to see immediately ruled out that those contaminant plumes that we knew had impacted these wells, that there hadn't also been some other unknown contaminants over time, e.g. PFAS. So I believe we own the former Wausau Chemical property now, which should make it quite efficient for us to rule that out. But I think just based on the information so far tonight, I'd make 2 requests: that all of these Superfund records related to CW3 and CW6 are placed prominently on the city website so that residents can read that information. And then the properties that we know had been contributions of other contaminants from the Superfund site, given that we're seeing the same wells at play here, I'd like to perhaps request that those are immediately ruled out as contributing sources of PFAS. And one would be the landfill, the other would be the former Wausau Chemical property, and perhaps the Marathon Electric property. Thank you.
Alder Larson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could I address Mr. Lindman? Mr. Lindman, so what you're saying is you're not going to be able to furnish us with safe water for 18 months?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying,
from the plant?
well, I mean, the water that we're providing right now meets all safe drinking water standards. That's what I can tell you right now. So
Let me rephrase the question. The water you're providing us right now exceeds the 20 parts per trillion, and you're saying that you cannot decrease that to under 20 parts per trillion for another 18 months?
nope, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, then
No.
what, then could
So-
you please clarify that, please?
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that with the pilot study, we're going to be able to determine what the best option is for us to reduce PFAS in the new water treatment facility when it goes online later this summer.
But isn't it a fact that how long is this PFAS study going to take?
Yeah, we'd like to keep this study going as long as we can, and if that's 12 months or 18 months, that's fine to gather data.
So in the meantime, you're not going to be doing anything with the water to lower it from the 20?
No, we'll make a determination on what the best option is for
So
the
we
actual
need to do
removal.
something now, then, in other words, we need to consider bottled water, filtration, or perhaps even a portable filtration station at the
Well,
And-
I want to be clear that the pilot study is going to help us determine what sort of PFAS removal we will get when the water plant goes online. That's what I'm telling you.
Okay.
Okay.
And I guess my other question is, why was this overlooked when this, you knew of the PFAS situation way back in 2018, 2019, before you even started this plan, with this plant, you knew this was going to be a critical thing to look forward. Why was this overlooked when this plant was planning to be built? And why, I mean,
Right.
I was here for the water meeting. It's clear that, the water department would meeting, they wanted to see if we could accelerate the construction of the plant, but what good would it do, because it's not going to provide us with water we need anyway. So, I guess I'm just baffled, because I too sat through that meeting. I got mixed messages. I heard what you said about the water, and I also heard what the DHS said, and what the DNR said, and what Dr. Yang said. So, you say our water's safe, and everybody says, well, everybody else says if you're drinking it, drink less of it. So, we have concerned citizens here today. What are you suggesting we can do today?
Well, I can answer your question, like when we were going through the design of the water treatment facility, right? We work with PSC and the DNR, and we address their concerns, and we had concerns of our own. We had items that we had to address with upgrades or a new water treatment facility. And so, first and foremost, we have to meet all safe drinking water standards, right? Second of all, there were water quality issues that we have currently, the DNR wanted us to address, okay? And namely, that was total organic carbon removal to improve water quality. And what that does, that sets us up in the future for having the ability to treat for things like this that are emerging, that come to light, right? That PFAS, those items at the time when we were going through that, were not a priority for the DNR with our design. They never came up as something we needed to do. EPA has a laundry list of emerging contaminants. We may be right back in this situation in a couple, 3 years, asking, okay, what can we do? I can tell you right now, with the new water treatment facility and the decisions that the council has made, has put us in a position where we can actually address these as they come forward. If we were still in our old plant and didn't have this one, we would be years out from addressing this emerging contaminant and others. And so I know that there's an interim here before we'll actually start removing PFAS. I will reiterate that it's unregulated right now, and it's evolving, and the health impacts are still being studied. And the messaging that we're getting from the state, they are not giving us any action orders at this point to do anything. So if there is an action to be taken in the interim, that will have to come from the governing body, from you. Those decisions will have to be made, not only the direction you want to go, but the funding to fund them.
And one more question then. You said that at that water meeting that a portable filtration system would not work, and now I heard through the grapevine that it could work, but it may take time.
Correct, yeah. There's a lot of challenges with it, Lou, and it's not that it won't work. It's finding the right configuration, finding out how, we connect it. There's a lot of challenges with it, right? Like, I get into a little bit of detail, right? So if we hook that up, we can't use disinfection through that media. So somehow we have to reroute our disinfection. And then we have to bring the water, if it's at the plant, we have to bring the water out of the plant and then bring it back into the plant. And so in the time-wise, we have to get plans put together for it. We have to get approvals through DNR and PSC for it. And so there's a time constraint there as well. And obviously economically as well. So yeah, When I talk in water terms, if that's 90 days out or 120 or whatever it is, I want to set the expectation that this is not a 2-week turnaround at this point in time, okay? So if that's an avenue that the council wants to consider, we are still talking with vendors on this. We're planning on having conversations with the DNR on this week, you know, to look at all these options. And continue down and try to narrow down what that timeline would be and what those costs would be and what that feasibility is going to be.
I guess like my concern would be just to get water below the recommended 20 as quickly as we possibly can to the citizens of this city. Thank you.
Yep, understood.
Mayor?
Thank you. I guess I'm glad we're having this discussion. I want to maybe point out, maybe to start the conversation about short-term solutions, which is kind of why we're here. I looked at the Environmental Protection Agency's guide to selecting Superfund remedial actions as kind of like, how do we determine what the best steps are? And, you know, looking at their evaluation criteria, it might be good for us to consider some of these things. Overall protection of human health and the environment addresses whether or not a remedy provides adequate protection. So it's a good thing to keep in your mind, like how are we addressing overall human health and protection of that? Compliance with applicable or relevant appropriate requirements. And so that's like how we even get started with these conversations, right? We don't want to have any kind of snake oil salesman in here telling us that we should do something that maybe doesn't work. So we want to make sure that what we're doing actually solves the problem and also protects human health. And then there's other things, long-term effectiveness, that might be when we're talking about that longer-term solution. Reduction of toxicity, mobility or volume through the treatment. Short-term effectiveness, that's another thing that we might consider. Implementability, that's something really important that we kind of discussed when it comes to, we got to make sure that what we're doing doesn't exacerbate a different problem, right? And then cost is something we should probably consider. State acceptance, obviously we want to work with our regulatory bodies. I've talked to them probably every day this month, and they have told me that they're willing to work with us as quickly as possible to get things turned around if we have a remedy, they want to work with us. And then community acceptance. Obviously, we need to do what's right for the community. So I guess I am encouraging us to consider maybe these as evaluation criteria. I'd be happy to send it out to everybody if you want to look at this. It's from the EPA. It's for Superfund remedial actions, but I think it can apply to us here.
Dr. Yang, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. It's Becky McElhaney, and I am asking, we had a member earlier when we had some communication issues, ask if you could go over some of your, like, health concerns you brought up in the Water Commission meeting regarding PFAS.
Oh, sure, yeah, and sorry about the connection issue earlier, but yeah, so we know from studies that have been conducted among people in communities that had, high levels of PFAS contamination, that PFAS can affect health. Now, we're talking about a class of chemicals, right? And in general, people aren't exposed to just one chemical. So we're looking at effects of, like, generally we try to look at the effects of, like, more than one PFAS or, which effects are, what I'm trying to say is which effects are consistent among the different kinds of PFAS we're seeing and are consistent among the studies we've seen. So there's lots of different studies out there. The studies so far have indicated that high levels of PFAS can affect cholesterol levels, can affect how our body can respond to certain vaccines, and decrease fertility in women. Now, again, like, this is not a summary of all the possible effects. These are just those ones that are, like, consistent across the board for PFAS from those studies among people exposed to high levels.
The second question was the amount. You had mentioned a liter for a child. Is that the same for an adult, or is the amount for adult water consumption different?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we calculate our standards, we're trying, state statute says that we have to use 1 liter a day to protect a young child, and that we use a body weight of 10 kilograms. But if we kind of scale that up to how much an adult weighs and how much an adult drinks, that's like a relative proportional increase. And so, again, that 20 is protective of all populations. So there's not, a big difference in terms of, oh, an adult drinks this much, so, we need to change the number. Like when we set the number, we're trying to protect all of the populations.
And I just,
Oh, sure.
okay, I had Pat. Pat, Lisa wanted to ask Dr. Yang, do you want to ask first, or do you want Lisa to go?
If Lisa has a question for Dr. Yang, go ahead. I have one for Eric.
Okay, you're next then, Pat.
Thank you. Now that we have Dr. Yang, so just for clarification, because I was watching the Water Commission meeting last week, and one of the water commissioners said, well, why 20? Like, why do we pick 20 versus some other number? Dr. Yang, I understood you to say that 20 being protective of all populations, 20 parts per trillion, was the safest level for a developing infant. Was that correct?
Yeah, so when we look to set the groundwater standards, we're looking at all of the available scientific information.
Okay.
And so we actually started with the 70 parts per trillion that EPA set in 2016 as their health advisory, and then went to see if there's any new information that's been published since then to indicate a different number is more protective.
Sure.
And in that literature review, we found some studies that indicate, that a lower level would be protective. So just a little backup in terms of how EPA set their 2016 number is that because PFAS act differently in people than they do in research animals, we need to model the exposure. For whatever reason, PFAS actually stays in people longer than it would in a research animal. So we had to model, like, if we fed this research animal X amount over, however many days, what would that look like in people? And so when EPA did their modeling, and we know from a lot of different studies that development is a very critical endpoint. So when they did their modeling, they were trying to see how much can a mother be exposed to protect from those health effects occurring in the offspring.
Okay.
The more recent studies we've seen have shown that the best way to make sure we're protecting infants is actually to model exposure to the infant itself, to either the unborn baby or the breastfed baby. So there's some newer modeling studies that have come out that have allowed us to do that, and that's how the number went from 70 to 20, is making sure we're protecting that, that baby who is actually, the most sensitive population.
Sure. Now, I guess, is that contemplating that people are getting PFAS through a number of vectors? I mean, it's everything from cosmetics to cookware to food containers to plastic wrap to water to fabric treatments. And so the likelihood that people encounter PFAS on a daily basis, the 20 standard for water at the parts per trillion, is that protective in spite of the existence of other vectors? Because there's no way to really know where else people are getting into it. So we're comfortable, though, that the 20 is our goal.
I mean, yes, DHS is, supports the 20. We think that is the level that is protective of human health in Wisconsin.
Okay.
There are other PFAS in other compounds. I would say, PFOA and PFOS have been voluntarily discontinued in the U.S. So, like, new products are probably going to have a different kind of PFAS. That's a whole other can of worms that we could get into.
Yep.
But from a drinking water perspective, yes, like the 20 is protected.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Pat.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted Eric, if he could, to clarify, early on, it sounded like the word was that we've got 6 months or 7 months before the new drinking water treatment plant comes online. And by then, I was sensing that it was being said that treatment equipment can be added to that plant so that when the plant comes online, we can be treating for PFAS. And now you mentioned pilot studies and all that, but are we going to be able to treat immediately when that plant opens up or shortly after?
Yeah, I think right now what we're looking at is that we will have PFAS removal when the new plant comes online. We don't know what level. And so, and if we want to change the type of media that we're using right now, we're going to need studies to show what that is. And so, and I also think that, you know, as we move forward, if we can maintain that pilot study for, you know, a significant period of time, you know, there may be a better option than what we're using currently, right? So, so the pilot study is really key to find out what level of PFAS removal we're going to have, because the media that we're proposing to use right now is not proven to remove PFAS. And then we also don't know if it does remove PFAS when we get to this, what we call a break point, you know, and how long that media will last. So the pilot study is going to give us a lot more information on that. And then also we'll be able to test other treatment alternatives in media to see which one works best for Wausau in the long term.
We're going to have something, but we're going to have to fine tune it.
Yeah, and those numbers will come with the pilot study, Pat, you know, once we start pulling that testing and stuff. Yep.
Okay, that's reassuring.
Alder Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor. Eric, I'm glad you're up here. I had some other questions. I brought up at the Water Commission, and I understand about the concerns about the PFAS, but we also are a city that's 150 years old. We still have a lot of infrastructure within our streets that is old or 100 years old, and that we have been dealing with lead pipes for how long? Is that going back to the 60s or 70s that they were outlawed at that point?
It was later than that. I think in the early 70s, I think we stopped putting them in.
Okay, so we still have homes that were construction prior to that. My house is 101 years old. And so I had a lead lateral that was in place until about a year and a half ago, when through the federal program, through the state, through the city, doing the lead lateral grants, I was able to replace that. But we still have a lot of old structure in a lot of areas around the city, unless it's like a new subdivision like the former farmland around Wausau West, which was farmland, was it 20 years ago? And it's really a new subdivision, so that all of that subdivision was new pipe, new water pipes, new sewer, and so that there's nothing there that would indicate that you're dealing with some old pipes. My concern is that even though we can work on the PFAS, we still have lead issues all around the city, in older homes, and underneath our streets, and that we had been dealing with it maybe 1 mile a year of upgrading. So unless we kind of do a accelerated program to replace the lead in the street, we still may be dealing with decades or 40 years or more until all the lead, which is in our drinking water, and that it may be affecting older homes with the older pipes, with the old lateral, and then coming and affecting their drinking water. So I'm concerned with both of them, and that in the long run, it just seems, is there a way we can work with the state or with the EPA and go with a kitchen water filter system that would be like Gravity, like I think that they have like the Pure Water, Brita, and then Zero Water, that Flint, Michigan, which had been dealing with lead and then corrosions due to changing their water system about 8 or 10 years ago. That has been one of the options that they have been doing, so that it can be used within a day or less of getting this kind of countertop filtering system in each home. I just don't know, supply-wise, if if there's capable to get like 17,000 of them for the number of residences or businesses in our area. Have you done any checking on that at all?
We did look at one, and they said that they were 90 days out, to get, but that was only really the one that we checked. So,
Okay. Aren't you saying, though, with the bottled water, from what we talked about, the Water Commission, that there's no guarantees that there aren't PFOS within some of those, because they may not, it's fairly new of being tested, and it may also just be not as filtered as what we already are getting at this point. And then we have people drinking water out of plastic bottles, which is not the best solution overall, and then you're talking about millions of bottles of water.
Right.
So, all right, thank you, Eric.
Okay. Alder Killian, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Dr. Yang, are you still available to answer a question?
Sure, yep, I'm still here.
Thank you. One of my colleagues had asked about what DHS had based its standard and health guidance on. Is it correct that there's a document, it's a composite of scientific literature from Cycle 11 recommendations that's about 400 pages long? Is it true that such a document exists?
Yes, so we have scientific support documents for all of the PFAS that we recommended standards for. They can be found on our webpage. I can, get that webpage to you guys after, tomorrow. I would say each chemicals is 20 to 40 pages, depending on how much scientific information there was. So that 400 is for a wide range of contaminants, not all for PFAS.
But
yes, that's
how many
available.
studies do you think, just ballpark, in terms of scientific literature related to these contaminants that DHS reviewed?
I would say easily hundreds.
And some were from across the globe, is that correct? Korea, China, all over?
Yes, yeah. So we look for, health-based guidelines from EPA and then from other federal agencies like the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. And, in their documents, they look at thousands of studies. So those are a really good resource for us, as well as the EPA. And then we also go and pull, studies, peer-reviewed scientific studies in research journals to see that we're not, missing any sort of information. And so those scientific studies could be conducted anywhere.
Well, thank you, and I think we should get that to the public on the city website. When I saw the number of studies that backed up your guidance, I nearly fell off my chair, so very impressive. Thank you, Dr. Yang. I've got some questions for Mr. Lindman. At least you got to sit for a moment. Sorry, there are so many questions here. Another thing DHS had that was really useful was a brochure, a PDF that you could view electronically as well, and it was how to reduce PFAS, including in the home setting, and it listed some information about certified products as well as a link to, I think, at least some products. Now, when I had talked to state regulators in the last week, I told them I was appreciative of that information, but also what I heard is that really state regulators weren't in a position to recommend to the city, hey, use this manufacturer, use this brand or what have you. And the counsel I got was to speak with the private sector, and so that is exactly what I did. And on the City of Wausau City of Madison water utility website, they reference a 2020 Duke study, so it's Duke University and North Carolina State, and looks like it's got some excellent data, and what they did assess was at-home filtering devices from different brands and manufacturers. I had the opportunity to send you some of that data today. So based on that, I guess what I'm seeing is, one, the Duke study showed that some particular filters could consistently reduce PFAS concentration in water, actually far below even the Wisconsin proposed standard of 20 parts per trillion combined. I spoke to one manufacturer that was listed in the study, and some of their products had consistently reduced the levels at home below the method detection limit. And when I asked what that MDL was, they said it was, the highest was around, I believe, 2.6, 2.7 parts per trillion. So very effective, but I think the beauty of that study is it's got multiple products and manufacturers that have been shown to be effective. And on that note, we currently have immediate access to eligible ARPA funds that we could use, I'm told, for such products. And I've heard volume concerns, but just like the wells are blended before you get the treated water, it would be possible for us to blend and mix and match different providers and products to meet any volume demands, I would imagine. And, well, I made it clear that I could not negotiate for the city, and I was just seeking information. These companies really put out there that if there was a high volume situation, it seems like the cost goes down dramatically. So all where this leaves us, and I guess where I'm going, is I would like to propose, and I don't know how we do this with a committee of the whole, that we use available data to at least come up with scientifically proven at-home filters that look good in legitimate studies like the Duke University study, that we start pursuing those. We look at perhaps a sample volume of households so we don't exceed demand out there, but we've got enough to start getting to citizens. And then we start interfacing with the private sector to see what the cost and the volume realistically looks like. And I know that in my zeal to pursue these things, I talked with other offices, and I had heard that there might be some concern about liability for the city if we were to provide such products to citizens. But I think that would be an important component to include when we have our meeting on how we're going to get our citizens at-home filters, that city attorneys or necessary outside counsel provide us with a plan, an effective plan to reduce any liability or exposure to the city. In short, we would meet not to ask, is this possible, but for the experts to tell us how it is possible. And so, yes, whether it's now or later, I'd like to propose this is forwarded to the relevant committee or the council, and we get moving, because in short, the feedback I've gotten from residents, they understand it's a complex, challenging situation, but what I'm hearing is they would like an interim solution as soon as possible, essentially now. So if we could phase this out, so we're using short-term bridges of solutions, then midterm and long-term options with the plant, I'd really like to get something going immediately. Thank you.
Okay, Alder Herbst.
Wow, I'm still awake. Just a few comments, and I won't be that lengthy, but I just look back and say, you know what? This has been decades that this item, PFAS, have been around. It's amazing that we have all survived, and so have our predecessors. As you well know, there's about 5,000 products out there, and that have them in it, including water bottles that you drink your water out of, along with other things that you use for cooking, etc. There's other cities that have this problem, not just Wausau. I mean, all of a sudden, it just seems like everybody's going to the highest level, panic level 5, and there are no regulations. The DNR proposes that they would like to have 20 parts per trillion. They want you to test your water, which is what the Water Commission is going to be doing. They talk about animal testing. Well, that's great, but I'm a human, so I can guarantee you the animal testing is going to be completely different than testing PFAS on human beings. We have a water commission that I would like you to remind you that is working on these options, and they need time to do the job. The water commission is a commission that makes all the decisions, and at that point, we'll take those decisions to the council, or first of all, yes, to the council, and we'll make the decisions as to what we should be doing. Everyone is in a panic mode. There is no need to panic. Our water is safe. And I wish that people would just slow down, accept the fact that, yes, we have a problem, but we are not the only city in the state of Wisconsin that has a problem. And I can guarantee you, we have the proper people in place that will take care of it and come up with the solutions. And first of all, they need to do the testing. And also, the Water Commission is reaching out to other people that have the knowledge to tell us perhaps what we can be doing, and if not, perhaps reaching out to someone else who's been successful in treating the PFAS. And at that point, working together with others, we should be able to solve this. But it's not something that we're going to solve overnight. That's the sad part of this. It's going to take time. And I'm just afraid of the fact that you want to do short-term fixes. You want to get these filtration systems in these homes. Well, you spend all this money, and wow, lo and behold, the new water treatment plant is up and running, and wow, everything is working sweet. We wouldn't have had to spend the millions or thousands of dollars in what we did. So please be patient. The Water Commission is on top of it. They are controlling every possible avenue that they can, and please reassure everyone that it is going to be fine. This city is not holding anything back. We are not out of the level. We are still within the level of safeties because, again, there are no regulations at this point, just proposals. Thank you very much.
Alder Rasmussen?
Thank you. I think we have a couple things that we have to sift through here. I mean, first, we have, in round numbers, about 10,000 water customers in our city. What we have is what I guess I would call a crisis of confidence in the system. We have people that are afraid to use their water. We have people that are afraid of what 30 parts per trillion means. We have people that are wondering what they should do next. Like, do they continue to use it? Do they not? And, you know, I can agree with some of Alder Killian's suggestions about a short-term solution, because I think we have two silos of thought here. We have, what do we do in the next 6 months? And then what do we do beyond that? And we know the solution beyond that is to open the plant with the right stuff in place. So the new plant, I'm confident, the new plant and the adjustments they make to the new plant will fix what we need fixed. What we do between now and August, I think, is key. And, you know, if we were going to look at individual solutions versus, I think if we were going to try to take the time to put large mobile filtration in at the current plant, by the time we get it approved, build it, and get it online, it would probably run for 8 weeks and then be moot. So if we're looking for something faster than that, some kind of personal filtration option makes sense. There's obviously options out there. He's found a number of them, and I think the key to giving out any sort of an item is to make sure it does the job, right? So a lot of filter pitchers that you go to the store and look at in discount stores are meant to give you better tasting water, but they're not necessarily meant to filter all of this new stuff that's coming down the pike. So I think in the last couple weeks, a lot of people, we would find that a number of people have purchased things off the shelf in retail stores that are not necessarily PFAS removal devices. And so I think what we should do is some research on the materials that Alder Killian brought up. So if we need to get to the quantity that we need, or, you know, figure out how many people would want them, if it takes 2 or 3 different products to get to what we need, I would like to see us work through that list. But the Water Commission, I think, has to be pivotal in this process. So it meets on March 1st. And Finance and Council meet on March 8th. So I'm hoping that we could sort through some of those options. And could a presentation be made to the Water Commission on March 1st with some of these short-term solutions? Have them consider a recommendation to finance to fund either a product or a combination of products so that we could at least make a start with getting an individual device to people who would want them. I think that the cost of that overall, to restore confidence in the system in the interim until we get this plant right, is worth what we would spend on it. And I had heard some figures tossed around last week that, if we were going to roll out something, that we're looking at somewhere between $350,000 and $450,000-ish. That's a lot of money, I know that. And maybe it's not that much, but depending on what quantities we would order up front, the Finance Committee is standing ready to consider a recommendation. So tonight, we just approved $250,000 for the pilot study of ARPA funds so that we can get things right at the plant. So looking forward, we're on the right track there. But if we need some more money for some of these products, could we get the Water Commission to sort out some options and bring us a recommendation to our meeting on the 8th that we could approve? We could do it at Finance and Council the same night, and we could at least make a start on a short-term solution. Because I think if we continue to allow fear and we continue to allow doubt and a lack of confidence in our water system, I think that even the actions that have been taken in the last 2 weeks by the school district have parents amped up. You've got a lot of uncertainty that is just breeding more and more anxiety out in the community. So if a short-term investment in something that gets us over the hump between now and August will kind of calm some of these concerns, I think that is funding well spent. Is it possible by March 1st to sort out a few products that may work?
For sure, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then Dawn is our rep on the Water Commission, and some of the water commissioners are here. So if the Water Commission would take those recommendations and recommend, at least an initial order of some quantities, Finance is happy to take up whatever that is. And, then we can start to appropriate some money. Now, if we want it faster than March 8th, we could probably consider special meetings. But with the one meeting being a week on the heels of the other, I guess I'll leave that to other people to decide.
I'm going to just jump in since I don't have a light. I'd like to just jump in and then I will get to Alder Larson. I would also like to look at this mobile filtration system that I believe is the most equitable system for our citizens. We can order these filtration units. We don't know who knows even to pick one up. Who's going to be able to put it together? Who's going to use it properly? That was talked about at the Water Commission as well. You have to change the filters at a regular amount. I also worry about things like other sources we get our water. Most people don't get their water from one spigot in the kitchen. They get, so you do it that way. We have water going into refrigerators. That's where I get most of mine, and ice cubes, and all of those things that we use kind of in rote, because it's like when the lights go off, the power, it's like you're running around turning on lights knowing the power's out. It's the same thing with water. So I just don't want to take that off the table because I think that's the most equitable. It gives every one of our users good water, and I don't have to worry about who's got a filter, who's using it right, who's not using it right, who didn't pick one up. I don't want to miss anybody. So please, I know that there's some logistical issues. I heard that there may be less of those, that, the more we look into it. So please, let's keep that option open as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I seem to have to chuckle because I was at that Water Commission meeting, and I heard one other person on the commission say, well, we really should not act real quickly on this. After all, we've been talking about the lead laterals for 20 years now. And I got the impression that, so we're going to let this drag on and drag on and drag on. No, we need to do something now. Our citizens are looking to us for leadership to do something now. Whether it be start out with bottled water, let's do that. Let's get those filters here for people who want them, and then let's get I agree with you wholeheartedly, Alder Becky, Madam Chair. Let's get this portable water filtration thing in here so all systems, all people are covered. If we use this 3-point system, all our bases are covered. Our people can go get their bottled water now. Maybe, okay, next week they can order their filter if they want it now. And then in the meantime, we can put this portable water filtration system on our plant until our plant is capable of taking the PFAS down to an acceptable level. So that is my suggestion, the 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor?
Sure. So I just wanted to say a couple of things. I think I'm glad to hear some recommendations from this body that we can take immediately to the Utility Commission at the next meeting. That's really important. And it's important for me to understand what the gut check is of this body that you'll be willing to support. So I also want to say that I don't think people are saying that we should panic, but I think people are saying they want to have the ability to make choices about their own health. And I think that if you don't have the means or the access, that's the problem. So if you have means, buy a filter. Go ahead, do it on your own. But what we're talking about are the people that can't. Whether they don't have vehicles, whether they don't have the funding. So I really want to make sure we're focused on some of those folks. So again, like short-term solutions, I think what we're going to find is that we're going to deploy a myriad of these things. Maybe it is shutting down the well. Maybe it is applying one of these mobile filtration systems to 1 or 2 of our wells to get us to that point where the DNR and DHS are saying, yep, you're below 20 parts per trillion. You're below this part where we're concerned about. So I think we're going to see a couple of these things. I just want to thank you folks who have offered solutions. We'll continue working on this, but I will continue listening and turning on my light, I guess, when I feel like it.
Good. Alder Rasmussen?
Thank you. I guess I wanted to just dig into the logistics concerns of the large mobile filtration unit. When I first started to consider what the options of this might be and ask some questions, that is the most equitable solution, but we have to look at the logistics, because if it takes us 3 months to put something in that basically runs 3 months and then isn't needed anymore, not only are we wasting time, but we're probably wasting money, and we're wasting, I had heard originally that has a price tag of almost $2 million. And so there's no room for it in the building at the old plant, so they have to basically knock a hole in the wall of the plant, pipe the water out through this filter, which is like a truck or trailer or whatever it might be, pump it back in. You got to get electrical to it, and you got to install heat around it or it'll freeze. So, by the time we would pull all that together, we could probably deploy some of the smaller solutions that Alder Killian talked about before. That's, if we were years from a solution, I would be the first person saying we need filtration right at the point of production and no other choice. But I think giving people choices includes their ability to either, come over to City Hall and pick up a pitcher that works, that we know works. They don't all work, but there's some out there that will. And I think we could do that a whole lot faster. We could make progress faster and in a more cost-effective manner, I think. I think it's easier for someone to manage a filter pitcher than it is something that installs under the sink. I think it's easier. There's some products that are going to be more user-friendly than others, and that's what I would like them to sort through and take to the Water Commission. And I want to be clear with the Water Commission that just because we don't have to do something doesn't mean we shouldn't do something. So, don't let the answer that comes out on March 1st be there is no short-term solution. I'd just like them to review what those are and figure out which ones might be best. And then the Finance Committee can pay for whatever is necessary or vote to, and then bring it back to this body to give the final blessing to. But, I think that this, mobile filtration, even though it's a good idea in concept, it could take forever when you're waiting for a solution. That's my concern with that.
That's why we're going to have them look at it. Thank you. Alder Lorian.
I guess I wanted to reiterate, I support what Lou was saying about the 1, 2, 3 process, and I attended the City Commission meeting too. I do think, as the Water Commission, they're looking at our long-term structure, though, of the water plant and the sewer plant and the effects, and that we're, as Eric had mentioned last week, we're talking about 5 million gallons of water a day that are going through and being processed. And I do understand they're looking at it from that kind of that bigger picture and what is the overall solution. And that I did bring my own personal system that I use at home, which I've had since 2009, to filter lead out of my water because I had old pipes and the old lead lateral. I realize that some people may not want to be bothered with it one way or the other, but I use it for all my drinking water and with my 2 cats. And I know some other people that use that system. I'm not necessarily recommending one system over another, but it's something that is considered like an emergent. If the plant shut down or some big disaster, the system I'm using will take any water from a pond, a river, a lake, and with the filters convert it into drinking water, and it's gravity done. But that some people may not want to set up, they may just prefer the bottled water. But I do think the impression I got from the Water Commission is they're looking at the long-term solution for the plant, and I understand that. But we need to have options for residents that's bottled water or other filtration, because we just don't know how long it's going to take, and that we should pursue that. I don't think it's been necessarily the big solution that the commission was planning to get to, but if Eric can add that and get that, there's other options so that we can have that information. Our residents want us to work quickly and now and not delay another month or 2. Thank you.
Alder Wodinski?
Thank you. I just want to state that I'm glad we got together to speak on this. Some solutions and some direction that we're giving the commission to look at. We're taking the concerns of the community in hand and looking forward to doing something for our constituents, for our citizens. I know that some of my constituents are worried about the water and some are not yet. So, some of these solutions we have, everybody might not want them. They might not use them immediately until we have more information. My question is, what if the state regulation doesn't come to fruition? What if it doesn't pass? What if the 20 parts per trillion is not a number? I still want us as the city to proceed forward, even if it doesn't meet state law, because I think our citizens deserve the best water we can give them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. You were fast.
Yeah, all I wanted to say is I wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment. I think the science is clear. The body of science is here, and if the politicians can't decide to do what's right, we still have to, as municipal politicians.
Oh, sorry, Alder Killian? Wrong way.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd echo Alder Wodinski and the mayor's sentiment that this isn't about politics. This is about our citizens' health, and a fundamental responsibility of the government, if not a primary one, is protection of our citizenry, and that means water too, of course. And yes, elephant, donkey, elephanty, it makes no difference. This is about human beings, and it's our job to protect them. And I did want to also comment a bit on some of my colleagues' comments following the filter discussion, and I think that 1, 2, 3 plan sounds excellent as well. With the filters, and I had done what the state suggested and talked to the private sector. They're I think it's very important what units we look at and how easy those are for households to adopt, because one unit that was going to be looked at was an Aquasana countertop unit, which looked very simple at first, but when I spoke to an Aquasana rep on the phone, she informed me that those only worked for standard faucet specs, and any deviation from that and the product would not attach properly. So I think, sure, let's look at a mix of different types of filter products as long as they're effective or proven in studies. But, you know, some of the under the sink models I've heard from the private sector are most how would I put it, could be applied to most resident situations, so you wouldn't have to worry about the specs. So I think I'd like to see at least one from the Duke study and under the sink model looked at. And then finally, I think Alder Wadinsky, when he said it was great, we had this conversation together. I think I agree with that, and it gave us a chance to talk about it. And when I brought up the filter, I hear it's going to the Water Commission now. Fine, but I think we should make it clear tonight that we don't need the Water Commission's permission or approval to do this with ARPA funds. That's my understanding. So let them take a stab at it. If they want to pass it, excellent. I think that's to their credit and honor. If they don't pass it, let's as a body send a message to bring it here, and we will pass it anyway. So thank you.
Alder Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess that kind of goes right into what I was about to ask you is what kind of action can we take here tonight? Is there any action we can take here tonight?
We're going to, no, it's not agenda to take action. What we are doing is coming up with a consensus of options for the mayor, our department head, and our water commission. And what we feel is some of the options that we are liking and we would like them to look into so they can act quickly on March 1st, you know, because they have that gap in there to get those information to them and get it back to us so we can get that. In the meantime, the mayor has brought up about the water. She's bringing in some water. If you know, the other thing that she brought up is that she can bring in more water for about 13,000. You know, this body needs to give her direction of how you want her to go with that small, you know, immediate solution. And then the immediate solutions was short term. We talked about, we're looking at filters, individual filters, the filtration unit, and the water, the bottled water is the immediate one that she started.
This will be discussed then at the next council meeting, and we can act on it then, I take it.
Yes, because that would be after, yes, that's after. It'll be on the agenda if, you know, if we need to act. Alder Rasmussen?
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a question about the bottled water that was offered for that price. Do we know that that water is PFAS-free, and is it safe? I mean, sometimes you may get something worse.
Yep, that's a really good question. So I've been working with our Marathon County Emergency Management, and he's been that's Phil Rentmeester, if you don't know who he is.
Yep.
And he has been asking all of those questions on our behalf, and he's confirmed that this is purified water. It is not, the water itself, the content does not contain PFAS, so.
Okay. So that said, if through the course of the work on this and the research, if you feel that it is of necessary and of value, I would ask that you bring a request to the Finance Committee for its next meeting to fund that if you feel that that is needed.
Done.
Okay, so March 8th, that'll be on the agenda for March 8th. The other thing is bottled water, I mean, even for disaster relief, expires. Do we know, we will be able to deploy it all in time, correct?
Bottled water, yeah, so we're working with our partners at the Neighbors Place and the United Way, so they are able to pass it out there and give it to kind of those underserved communities.
Well, and it's not a lifetime supply, so I think that's something,
no.
if we can get that out in the field sooner than later, bring that request for the 8th then.
Right, so I just want to, I'm sorry, you didn't even acknowledge me, I'm not used to sitting here. I I will tell you, I have authorized 31 pallets that are donated from corporate folks who want to help out, and I didn't need any of your authorization, and I said, yep, bring it on in. So that'll be here this week. Some of it is already there, it's probably already been passed out. Now, this stuff is another 31 pallets, and that would require us to pay for the shipping. So I can keep my feelers out there, and I know that I keep getting folks reaching out to me, and I just keep directing them to our friends
Well,
at the neighbor's place.
I guess the only thing I would say is if a donor comes up prior to that, I mean, obviously feel free to take advantage of it, and I believe that you have budgetary discretion to spend up to $5,000 with no one's approval. So, you know, if those opportunities present themselves, but in the meantime, if you need the sum of water for the 13, we're happy to take that in finance.
Yep, perfect.
Alder Larson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one question for Mayor Katie. Where can I direct the constituents of District 10 to go pick up these cases of water?
I would have them contact the neighbor's place. They are well aware of both the logistics of it and when they're open.
Thank you.
Yep. Sorry.
Go
They
ahead.
could also find information at United Way, or, you know, we're working with some of the others. But neighbor's place is kind of the place with the warehouse and the loading dock and all of that stuff.
Okay, I see no more lights. I guess, Eric, you can sit down.
Thank you.
Rest. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Does anybody have any other questions or concerns? Otherwise, we'll wrap this up. I thank you all for coming. This was an important thing. I think all of us have gotten a lot of feedback from our residents, and they felt that some felt that the council wasn't moving, but be aware, residents, if you don't hear from us, it doesn't mean we're not working. I'm at City Hall almost every day since this happened, and we want everyone, we are water drinkers, we have the water, we all want everyone to be healthy and happy, and this is something that we don't take lightly. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Wadinski, second by Neal, and we are adjourned. Thank you.